Hello and welcome. Today we're going to open up by discussing the Learning Python series and where we last left off. We were in the process of building a working Oanda bot that was profitable. Now we covered quite a few nuances within the Oanda library, and we actually built a working prototype to begin really testing and getting an understanding of the market. That's where we're at today, is actually going through and picking up and talking about just exactly how we're going to take the next step in our journey. So here's the program we built, the water glass, which basically breaks even. We need to take this to the next stage. And to do that, well, we need to move to the next stage. So I've actually done that. And let me get over here into this window. But before we get too far ahead, the one thing that needs to be made clear is that the library we used, well, that's gone through some changes too, and we'll get to that shortly. You see, part of open source is always being able to build on bigger components. And those bigger components often mean frameworks and infrastructure. And that's what I used for this bot, was I built a framework that was started out with and was the simplified version of the Oanda library we have been building over time. So let's actually take a look at the bot. So here we are, our Oanda bot, working money-making prototype. It's a simplified grid bot, and it really does exceptionally well. If you've seen some of the shorts in my YouTube channel, then you've seen some of the profits I've posted. Now I use the Jackrabbit Relay framework. And in fact, when I started building the Oanda library for this series, I explicitly wanted to build it in such a way that when it came time to integrate into the bigger picture, it became an easy way to understand the next step. And you'll see just how easy this bot is because of that approach. So we have the basic starting point. We have all of our imports. And you see where I am referencing and using Jackrabbit Relay as the framework. This is what carries out all of the communications between Oanda and our bot. It makes the job a lot easier because all I have to do is work on focusing on what the bot is supposed to do. Focusing on the actual mechanical process the bot is supposed to carry out. So let's start off right off the bat with looking at this very first step. Lot start and lot step. Now these are dynamic and can be changed to any value you want. But you want to be careful because when you're first beginning to work with a bot, it can very quickly consume your money if you don't plan out proper risk assistance. And a risk assistance is really where this starts. Starting point of one is assistive in that you can quickly begin to see that starting small gives you an advantage because it doesn't go out of control too quickly. Your assessments need to be at the most minute values possible within your budget. Now, for the purposes of my live trading account, I have $100 in my account. That's it. The biggest issue that you're going to be dealing with any kind of automated trading bot is that it can quickly get out of control. So from that standpoint, we want to really limit that as much as possible. So let's go right into the actual bot. Now this is a grid bot. That means it takes and makes purchases at explicit intervals in between each other and certain distances, so that it can ride up and ride down the market without having to worry about just how the market changes. It's a defensive approach that works well as long as you understand the risks of the budget. Having the leverage that Oanda provides makes it easy to control your risks because you can actually watch your leverage. In this case, we're using a 50-to-1 leverage because it gives us more ability with our money and makes it easier to control how much we're going to consume. So the very first thing we've done is we need to connect to the framework. Now this is not that different from what we've seen in previous videos with the Oanda library and being able to connect to the framework there. This process actually just makes it a little easier in that it's simplified because the framework I've provided, the framework that this is using, does a lot of stuff for you. So it makes it easier for you to focus on getting what you need done for trading. So we start out with the framework, we check the parameters, and we know we need the exchange, the account ID or account number, and then the asset we're trading. Pretty straightforward. Those are required, so if we don't get them, we simply let the user know and exit. Now, for this particular program, I added one additional element. I added a margin limit. With Oanda, everything is margin based. So having the margin limit is a way of making sure we control just how much we consume. So in a $100 budget, if I set my margin limit to 20, that means that asset will stop purchasing after $20 of margin is consumed. That doesn't seem like much, but figure that that's about 800 units of Euro USD. So that can get quite substantial. But it's part of the hedging process that mitigates the risk that you take on when you trade. From the standpoint of that process, we need to think about what our actual profit is going to be. Forex is a very different kind of market than cryptocurrencies. Subsequently, your profits need to be measured differently. Now, more often than not, in Forex, 10 pips does well. it's enough to make a decent profit and cover the fees that you're going to pay, which is the spread between your bid and your ask. What I've done though is I've taken the absolute profit of 5 pips. That's my profit level. But that's not going to be my ending profit level. That's just going to be the starting reference. Because the standpoint that I want is I want my trades to start at a 5 pip profit, but then to dynamically adjust to the market. And that's where we actually start with our first trade. We start by getting the ticker, the bid, the ask, and the spread. We look at the buying price, and we look at the first lot size, which in this case is 1. Now, because we are under the first in, first out rule, in order to make sure we can close an individual position, each position must be a different lot size than the previous. But that works out well for us because that's how we make our profit. So we have the lot size and we have the ticker. Now we'll make a log entry and we'll actually cover the actual purchase that we're about to do. Now, because I'm using a framework instead of just the Oanda library directly, that framework has provided me an easy way to set up my order. So I'm going to send order. I'm going to use my framework connection relay. This is what I used when I opened up the reference at the very top. I'm telling it we want to buy, and the number of units is the lot size, but we're using a negative number explicitly because we want it to short. So if we don't have an order, and that's what this is, open trades, nothing's open, then we need to make an order. We need to start the process. Nice and simple. If we do have trades, then we need to figure out what the lowest number for our lot size is. So let's actually go up and first talk about some of that information. Now, as we just saw, send order below. Send order is what we actually use to communicate to the framework, to relay. So it's going to set up all of the things we need. That is, we need an identity. We need to have a way of protecting this order. The exchange we're working with, which is Oanda, our current account. The asset we're working with, in this particular case, it could be Euro USD. We are placing a market order. And now we get the action, buy or sell. At this point, we look for units and we look for a ticket number. Now, these are some unique options because if we're closing a ticket, we're not going to pass in the units. But if we're passing in the units, we're not going to be closing a ticket. So this helps us actually figure out what we're doing without going through a lot of convoluted steps. And then once we're finished, we actually use the framework and we send the order to the exchange. And then from there, we simply return the results of that processed order. And we are going to look at exactly how those orders get processed very shortly. So here we go. Nice and simple, easy step. That's all we need with this framework to actually place an order. So let's get back down into the main loop. Now, nothing new here from remembering the Learning Python series. So far, everything's pretty straightforward and simple. First thing we need to do, we need to get the balance of the account. This really isn't needed for the purposes of functioning within the program. But it is a nice touch to be able to show the progress. And let's actually open up another window and let's see what that looks like. Now I have 3 assets trading. And it's showing Euro USD and it's showing USD with the Swiss franc. So here we go. We see how the log works. We actually see our balance too. Currently 102.18.337. And you see we're selling, we're making profit. See, that is the niceness of this bot. It's simple. And that's how we actually make money. But this bot is not just simple. It's extremely deceptive because it does do so well making money. It's not making a lot of money because my positions are very small. And it can be scaled up over time once I learn more of the market that I'm in. And that's where just letting this run slowly and build up is the perfect way, just to pull in little profits at a time, but without overextending the account too aggressively. And really, in automated trading, that's your worst situation you're going to deal with. Automated trading actually works great for this type of a situation as long as you don't scale too quickly. So now that we've got the balance, we're going to figure out what our margins used are. So Oanda provides the positions, which we already know from the previous library we've worked with. Now, if there's no position, then that means we don't have any margin used yet. Nice and simple, we sold off, so we don't want to worry about doing any advanced math. Okay, now we do have a margin. We go out and we figure out what that margin is. So now we've taken our margin and we established a margin pips. This is kind of a sneaky stunt with this bot because we can actually take the margin used and through this equation of the margin used multiplied by 1 pip, we can create a special variable that gives us a buffer zone the more we build up margin. For example, if our margin is $20, that means through this equation we can establish that the next purchase has to have a minimum of 20 pips. We can actually slow down purchasing as we consume our margin. We have a nice way of controlling risk built right into the entire process. So that's what margin pips does, is it gives us that space. So whatever our margin is, multiply it by 1 pip, and that becomes a minimum distance space in price movement that will apply when we look for our next purchase. And we can kind of see that already when you look at the prices right here. You'll see that they're not that uniform and that they're kind of staggered based upon the margin. And that really is the whole point that we want to deal with. We want to slow down the number of purchases every time we make a purchase. So the more we purchase moving forward, the less we want to purchase moving forward. So the dynamic abilities of this kind of a thinking process gives you a way of protecting your investment, and it helps you control your risk. It's not a perfect process, but it does realistically mean that through this approach, you're not going to extinguish your budget entirely too quickly, as long as you don't pick a starting lot size that's too large. And this is why starting at 1 really is critical to the process, because then you can see how over time it will begin to work and kick in a way that allows you to pick up positions that are reliable, safe, controlled, and realistic to your current budget situation. So let's get back into the code and look at the next part. Okay, we're getting the ticker again. And now we need to try to figure out the highest price. Remember, we're shorting this asset. So we want the highest price, because the highest price is going to be where we start looking for our next purchase. And in Oanda, a purchase on a short means we're going up in price. Now we pull the number of open trades, because that's going to help us find out what we have right now. And now we actually go through the process of looking at open trades. We figure out the current price. Right now, that's the current price based upon what we've actually purchased. So, as we start reading our entries, we know how many units we have, we know what we paid for it. So, if the price is greater than the highest price and then the pip step. So what is pip step? Well, pip step is the 5 pips we want for our profit. We want 5 pips minimum profit, period. But that's not all we're doing here. We're actually taking one step further and taking the spread. So if we have a 2 pip spread, then that means that our price has to be greater than the highest that we've seen so far. It has to be greater than the pips that we have that we want for our minimum profit and the spread. So overall, just at this level, the next purchase needs to be 5 to 7 pips. And since the pip spread is never 0, we can always guarantee that within 1.5 to 2 pips is going to be the spread. So the price distance is going to be a minimum of 6.5 to 7 pips from the current price. And since we're looking at what we've already purchased, the highest price marker needs to be this situation. So if in fact the price of this position is greater than the highest price plus the pip step plus the spread, then we adjust the highest price. We make sure the highest price is indeed the highest. This is where we want to make sure that we don't overstack our positions. We don't want our positions to cluster together because that will burn up our margin. We want to make sure that we are spread out across the width of the market. So now we see here that we're recording the ID of this order, we're recording the number of units in this order, and we're recording the price that we paid for it. So it's that simple. Now, this depicts the price that we make a profit. This is our profit price. And because we're shorting, price for a short needs to be less than. So our price that we paid, less our pip step, less the 5 pips of profit we want. And we also need to make sure we take into account the spread. We want 5 pips of profit. So we need to make sure that our 5 pips take into account the spread that exists right this minute. It's a simple process that just does well. Now, let's look at our profit. Time to make a profit. So our selling price is going to be the price minus the pip step minus the spread. So that's our selling price. So if our current asking price, since we're shorting, if our current asking price is less than our selling price, and we actually have something to sell, because we're shorting, our unit numbers are going to be negative. So we need to have something to sell. So we do. Then we place our short sell. We place the selling price. We place the number of units, but we want the absolute value because we don't want negative units to show up for what we're selling. And we place the current balance on the screen that we've actually traded, or technically the log, really. So whatever the balance is, that gets saved. So we can see within our log just how our account is going to go up over time in small increments. And now we send the order. We're issuing a close action because we want to close out the whole ticket. And we're issuing the ticket itself. So now we see that because we're issuing a ticket, we're not issuing the number of units. Because whatever this ticket is holding, we simply want it to close out completely. And now we look for a replacement order. If we've managed to sell the topmost order, and that could easily be the one that starts the next process, then we want to make sure that we aren't too close. We don't want to be stacked. And let's actually look at that function. And when I say stacked, I particularly mean we don't want orders grouped together. So here we go with the already bought. We want to make sure our orders are spread out. So we need to check the existing asset and the existing price with the amount of distance that we need between each one. Now, in order to make sure that we do this, we need to make sure that the there must be a space above the position and a space below the price position that another order does not exist. So, the current price of the order minus the pip steps and the current price of the order plus the pip steps. So we have a range. So in this case, let's say our spread is 2. We know that our pips for profiting is 5. So the price minus 7 pips to the price plus 7 pips cannot have another order. So basically at this point, looking at this code, we're saying we must have a 14 pip spread to make sure no orders are around us, so we're not overstacked, so we're not building up too many orders in one place. Now we only need 7 pips between order technically going down or up, but when you look at this order covers a complete 14 range or 14 pip range to ensure that it is given plenty of space to grow and mature on its own. So let's go back down to here, look at our replacement order, and we see that now that we don't have something already bought in this range, that is point blank, we have enough space where everything is stepping around. And you'll notice here I actually added a twist. The replacement order takes into account the margin pips. Remember above when I used the margin to calculate the number of pips to add spacing. So if we have a $20 margin, then along with the 7 pips that we have from the spread, this is going to add an additional 20 pips required for the purchase. So if we have a $20 margin, then in order for this replacement purchase to take place, price must have moved 27 pips. Now you really begin to see just exactly how the system really works. Now we begin to see why it becomes such a unique defensive approach to keep you from burning your budget so quickly. Because we actually take into account the actual profit we want. Our absolute, we want 5 pips profit. We take into account the margin we're using, and we take into account the actual current market spread as it changes and fluctuates in real time. So, in order to make sure that a purchase takes place, this requirement must be met. The current asking price must meet all of these situations. When that's done, now we look at our margin limit. If it's less than 0, meaning I've set it to -1, I'm not looking to control margin. That's actually set up here. Let's see. This is what this part does right here. So if we don't give the program a margin limit, it sets margin limit to -1, meaning the program doesn't limit its purchases based upon the margin. So we have that done. So if we don't have a margin, then we just make the purchase. If we do have a margin, meaning that the margin limit is greater than 0. So say I've set my margin to $20. That's my margin limit. Well, that means then that the amount of margin used must be less than my limit. If it's not, a purchase doesn't take place. The account just sits and waits for the next sell-off. I figured out the lot size. I figured out the lowest position within the lots used. So if my last lot size was 10, then my next lowest lot size needs to be 11. I get the orders, pull out the details for the last order, and then I figured out the price. So now I know what my last price in my orders are. So when I go to place it, I can use that information. That gets used for logging purposes, so you can see exactly what your price was that you're replacing. Remember, this is a replacement order, so we need to see what we're replacing. And now we actually make the replacement. So now let's go to the next step. Well, the next step is just a purchase. The market has moved against us, and we look at the buy position. So we have the highest price plus the pip step plus the minimum 5 pips we want. We have our margin pips. We have our limiter. And then we have the spread in real time. Now we simply print this to the screen. This is the buying price. This is the current ticker, whatever it is. And then the margin we're currently using. Short, sweet, and simple. But now, if the ticker asking price is actually greater than the buying price, meaning we have exceeded the highest price possible, plus our profit, plus our margin, plus our ticker, then we make a purchase. Only if we are not stacked. Again, we don't want to be too clustered with our orders. We want them spread out. And we check the limits again to make sure we're within the limits for our purchase. So now, we show the buying price and the lot size, and we place our order. And now we just print the lot size. Short, sweet, simple there. We save the price for future reference if we need it, and then we just go to sleep for a second or two based upon the load of the VPS to keep everything short, sweet, and simple. So there we are. The program really is very simple because we've been able to focus on actually just trading. The infrastructure handles all of the underlying headaches for us. That really is the point of why, instead of writing the library yourself, like we did in the last example, and putting it together, by using an infrastructure like Jackrabbit Relay, you can focus on just trading. You can focus on your actual equations, your mathematics, the functionality of what you're trying to achieve. So let's go through and actually take this back up to the top. And I've got, okay, let's go right here. I've got 3 examples running already. And these are the outputs that I described, as you can see. Now the nice thing about this is I can stop the program, but because of the way I wrote it, I can just start it back up and continue, and it will automatically pick up where it left off. So as you can see, here is each position, the ticket numbers, the actual price we purchased, and then the price that we make our profit. For example, here is the highest one, 92,791. 92,726 is the actual point I make my profit. So when the price drops below this number, this ticket number of 4 units gets closed out. And right now, the ticker is 92,779. So it's quite a bit above what our price is. But we're only using about 40 cents of margin. So you see just how this bot really works. And here we see the actual next buy price, 92.86. And that is in fact higher than this price. And the 92.86 will fluctuate based upon the margin spread and the ticker spread. So now that we have the actual next purchase price, the actual current ticker, and our current margin, let's restart this program. And here, as I've demonstrated, USD, Swiss franc, my margin limit $20, and then of course my Oanda account information. And here we go. Now we can see it ticking away and working. Let's pause it. We can see, here's a good example. 64, 62. So basically 92864. 92862. So you see that there is 0.2 of a difference in pip spread between each. So you see the price fluctuation for the next purchase in real time. You see just how this bot is dynamically changing. Okay, so let's go to the next bot. Same thing, we'll stop it. This is Euro GBP, Euro British Pound. Same thing, we have 31 cents of margin in use. And you can see how the pricing is setting itself up. You see the ticker here changing over time. This one isn't really that exciting, much like the other one. It's pretty straightforward. But let's go to this one. This one is exciting because it's been running for a while. It's been building up. It has a margin. So let's stop it. We have $4.91 used in our margin. We have our current ticker rate and our worst case scenario for purchase. And as you can see, the number of units goes up by 1 unit every time we make a new purchase, or our lot size has been described here, to which we have 22 lots right now. in functional existence. So that may not seem like much, and it's really not. $4 of margin being used is actually quite small compared to what I've consuming. So basically take this, add it up, and there you've got your balance. All total, you're looking at about $200 worth of Forex being held in this account. And that goes back to what I said earlier about the deceptiveness of this bot. $200 for basically the rate of $5. That's pretty good. So, looking at the context though, we see just how well it works. And we see here in the log, we see just how easy it is to get lulled into a false sense that this is just going to tick away forever and we need to scale it up as quick as we can because it looks like the magic cash machine. It's not a magic cash machine. It's a mathematical process that over time simply does well. And that's what makes this bot so unique. You don't need to worry about the entry point. You don't need to worry about the exit point. It does it all for you in a way that mitigates risk. Because of the way it's built, because of the simplicity of the risk mitigation process built into it, it becomes a very nice little way of running almost indefinitely. And it will change with the market over time. Now you can start it out at 10 units. You can start it out at 100 units. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that you keep it controlled and limited when you're first starting out so that you can see exactly how it will work in the long run in relation to your budget. And you can see in relation to the profitability what that is going to achieve over a small period of time. Because now we're going to let this run, say a week, 2 weeks, evaluate it every day, watch how the margin is used. Now I have $100 in this account, but I have limited all 3 coins just to $20 each. So if I need to adjust my margin for one particular coin to give it a little more breathing room, I can. I don't plan on going above 90 total though, just so I have that extra safety cushion built into my budget. I don't want a margin call, which is exactly why I put this limit in place. It's going to take a lot to push $10 in margin to force me into a margin call, which is why I really set this up in such a way that it does well. It does defensively well, in fact. And I keep harping on this, I know, but that's the point of what you need to understand when you're dealing with a bot. When you build trading bots like this, they're very deceptive because they hide the true risk of trading. This bot deliberately hides the true risk of trading just because it's so simple. When you see these profits and you just see them slowly tick away over days, you begin to realize that this can in fact be a simple passive approach that just does well. And it does do well even when you pay your finance fees, because you're still making enough profits through the circulation of your money through your margin, that the finance fees are going to be very cheap comparatively. Now, you can do long or short. I chose to go short with these. I may end up going long in the future. And really, there's not that much difference between the approaches. Both long and short are pretty much identical, with the only difference being, let's get down to here. Okay, the only difference being really, instead of subtraction, you're adding. So instead of looking for the highest price, you're looking for the lowest price. And then you're moving up and down appropriate. But ideally, what makes this part nice is you can run both at the same time on the same asset in two different accounts. You could set up a long bot in one account on Oanda and a short bot in another account on Oanda. Run them both at the same time and actually have them competing off of each other in a way that gives you a bit of a hedge. Now, over time, they're going to find a balance within the market. And that's going to help in terms of making money in both directions. For now, though, my purposes was just to make sure everything worked, and I wanted to see it, to get an idea of what to expect in the bot itself, what to expect in the process. I'm not as familiar with Forex as I should be, so I wanted to just go slow and easy and really just keep it very simple. And that's the point that this gives me. But let's take and let's just bring up one log. Let's look at the Euro USD. Now, I made some modifications to the logs to show the balance. When I first started this process, and you can see I started it at roughly 12:30 on the 30th of 2022 December. It's not been running very long. 6-7 days. So here we are. Here are all of the transactions it's done in the timing. Again, it doesn't look like a lot, and that's really the point. It doesn't need to be a lot to be profitable. I could raise the pip step if I wanted to, and yes, that would give me a little bit more profit, but it would also take longer. I'm not worried about it though, because I factored in the spread. So the spread changes dynamically as it needs to within the market to give me a way to dynamically grow appropriate to what we've done. So as you can see, when the market starts getting busy, that's when I make money. That's the beauty of this process. It makes money through the volatility of the market. When the market is quiet, it doesn't produce as much money. But you can see how it buys and sells, and it just does great. For example, right here, perfect example. Market moved against me, we made some purchases, then we made some sells. And you can see that the sells weren't very much. And they don't have to be very much to make a reasonable profit. because this accumulates over time in a trickling effect. So we made 3 sales, then we ended up purchasing more, meaning the market moved against us. Then we made a sale, 2 more purchases, a sell, 2 more purchases. And you can see this back and forth give and take. As the market fluctuates with people wanting to buy and sell to drive the price, the bot is buying and selling at opportunities to either push up or push down its own holdings. With the most recent one being right here. So, I think we're going to call it for this right now because, well, I've covered the program pretty thoroughly. It just does a good job. History-wise, the logs are, well, quite simple. I do want to go into more of the process of Jackrabbit Relay over time, but I don't want to overload you. Dealing with a framework is a big jump from the small library that we started with. And really, that's one of the biggest problems with the open source market in general. When it comes to actually taking a project like this, and then taking it to the next step, scaling it up, it can be overwhelming. It can be quite difficult. So when I did this whole system, when I thought about the direction I wanted to go, I wanted to build it in such a way that as you move through learning Python, you begin to see that you can break down any large program into small steps as long as that program has done a good job in documenting itself. Meaning the developer thought about somebody coming in and wanting to contribute. All too often, open source programs don't always think about who's going to come in later on. I wanted to make sure through the learning process that the Oanda code and subsequently moving forward the Jackrabbit Relay code both conveyed a sense of learning and a sense of wanting to develop further. A way that you can begin to pick up and carry forth to the next step, where you can learn through a series of easy to understand abilities. None of this code is complex and it's not overbearing. Everything follows the 6 basic rules that we got back in the early lessons of learning Python. Just follow through the 6 basic steps, one by one, with the simplicity of the way the program is written. It's designed in such a way to make it easy for you to move to the next step. And in this case, it's designed in such a way to actually be profitable. So you'll be able to take this information, run this bot, test it, and I do have videos on how to set up Jackrabbit Relay. You'll find them on the GitHub page for it, and I'll put the link to that in the description. So as we move forward and we take the next step, we start moving to the bigger arena. We start moving to the point of what automated trading really is. Automating the trading in such a way that we can make consistent profits over time reasonably well and concisely. If you found this information useful, please give this video a like, share it, subscribe if you're not, because it does help the YouTube algorithm see this video to get other people into automated trading in a responsible way that doesn't put them at risk inappropriately, and it doesn't expose them unnecessarily to frauds and scams, because they can see exactly what's going on. And with recent events of 3 commas API hacking, understanding this kind of a framework is now even more critical. So please help me spread the word. Like this video. Until next time.